I don't know, more single target or a more concentrated DPS or whatever, they don't feel so bad now for running that as opposed to just running the, I mean, sand spit where you can just like nuke entire screens every 2 seconds.
The bad case of this though is definitely the tower map, because it's like you mandatorily have to run that map, and so having that be not great is like not a good situation. So hopefully we've addressed that one. Like that was really urgent to address, because it's like it's mandatory, right? You can't just skip it. So that one had to be sorted.
Our map should
turns
have
out
like
it's maybe not a good thing where you have to approach a room full of monsters that you don't know what they are and they're super dangerous and you can't see them and it's a narrow bottleneck and you have to run in and just die.
But even so, like obviously the variety helps with that, but also the new version of that map is now based on the top floor tile set, which has like got more variety and like it's easier to deal with. So that should improve a lot of that.
Bit of visibility,
yeah, exactly. So it
more
helps
open,
a lot.
less tight bottlenecks. Still they're still relatively narrow here and there, but much better to clear.
Mm-hmm.
So one more follow-up here, and I'll pass it off to Ghazi. In the reveal, you mentioned that the boss maps, for instance, were supposed to be more common than they actually were. And so this comes to a very common question about Waystone's sustain. So what was your opinion on the state that previously was with Waystone's sustain, as well as do you believe this impact of additional bosses are obviously going to impact Waystone's sustain? So you think this is going to help alleviate some of the feedback we've seen related to there?
That one's pretty interesting because, and this is probably going to be a controversial thing to say, but like we don't know that there necessarily is a problem with Waystone Sustain as such. So that means we have to look into, if people say that there is, and that means we have to understand why that is, because I don't think that's the experience that like we're having as we're playing ourselves. And like, so there's always this thing where it's like we want to hear what the players say, but then we always want to confirm with our own experience that like when we do what they're doing, that we're getting the same experience before we can kind of make a good decision about what a change would be. So I don't know that we've identified why it is yet that players are having problems with Waystone Sustain, and so that's like, and this will change this obviously because there's more bosses and so on. Like that's the thing you do. Killing bosses will give you, upgrades and so on. Like that'll help with that. But I guess I sort of like, I feel like we need to understand that problem more before we can really work out what exactly needs to happen with it.
There's certainly more to learn there, but as I said before, the minimum's now higher for sure.
Right. So it can be just people running into bad specific maps that like have specific problems that someone who's.
I suspect it's also just a lot of people struggling with the difficulty and dying, and like it's obviously very different if you're dying even in 30% of your maps, 20% of your maps. I mean, even 10% of your maps, it can make that difference. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's definitely 100% more to look into there. But like, I personally, I went to from tier 1 to tier 15 maps in a total of 32 maps, and I've sustained since. And then you see the things where people are talking about map sustain, and I'm like, okay, am I in a different universe? And the answer is probably yes, I am in a different universe. But from a purely anecdotal standpoint of my own, I try and I'm going to see how it is for myself, and I'm somewhere else. We need to look more into this somewhere. So we have other people at the office as well, of course, and you get their anecdotal experience, but we need to look at this from a much broader perspective. But either way, what we've just put forward is an improvement to all of that. Higher maximum, sure, higher minimum, and a bit more safety for bad luck. But what it doesn't really account for right now is safety for people dying and, failing 50% of their maps or N% of their maps.
There is a slightly more subtle thing going on, I think, which it's kind of unfortunate how this turned out. But effectively, because you can power through the map tiers really fast, it means that you don't get a chance to find the gear that you would otherwise have as you went through those tiers. And that means that effectively when you do, like you might be playing higher tier maps than what you really should be playing for the amount of wealth that you've found. And that means that your map sustain is bad because you're dying more often